Hi, my name is Alyssa Aska and I am a composer. In this video, I am going to discuss one of my gamified pieces, Occumbotactus. This is a piece I developed in collaboration with Martin Ritter to specifically serve as a series of interludes for a house concert hosted by the Verschleierte collective in Graz. Occumbotactus is a side-scrolling gamified piece that is designed for play or performance by two people. It is broken into several short levels due to the nature of it being performed between pieces during a concert. The entire piece is based on Omne Trinum Perfectum by Ludwig Senfl, a Renaissance puzzle canon. We needed to create something that would lend cohesion between pieces in an audio-visual concert. As this was a house concert, we thought that a gamified piece could be interesting, considering that gaming with a friend in their living room is a concept many are familiar with. We also wanted something that was broken up into several individual levels, so that these levels could be completed between pieces. But we also needed them to be kind of short and simple to refresh and rejuvenate the audience between performances. Side-scrolling games are one of the most ubiquitous and recognizable games, and they also provide the opportunity for complete yet succinct levels. A level in Mario, for example, can be completed in mere minutes, and this is not the case for later and more elaborate 3D games. Therefore, we ultimately decided on creating a continuous side-scroller game that would require two players from the audience. Having multiple players makes it less daunting to play a level for an individual, as a single-player game might make audience members hesitate, since it resembles more of a solo performative event rather than a hybrid performance/friendly game. The overall concept of the game is quite straightforward. It consists of multiple levels, each of which are timed, and two players begin each level with a score of 0, and they accumulate points during this level. Whoever has the most points at the end is declared the winner. This game does then have clearly defined goals that are made visible to the performers and also to the audience. But how does the actual gameplay work? This is not as straightforward, and this is where the difficulty of the game comes in, as well as its role as a performative device rather than just a game, since it does not really matter how poorly or well the players play. Each level consists of 3 components that the players can see aside from their avatars on the screen. At the top, there is a given melody, a cantus firmus, which is a segment from Omne Trinum Perfectum by Ludwig Senfl. In the middle, there is a staff line background through which platforms containing notes of various durations scroll at different speeds and different directions. And finally, at the bottom, there is a version of the cantus firmus, but with different note durations than the cantus firmus at the top. So what exactly are the players supposed to do to gain points? At the beginning of each level, a screen displays the following information: what the mensuration is, so for example, half speed, 2 times speed, or everything in the speed of quarter note triplets, etc. And then whether they are supposed to match the rhythm only, or if they are also supposed to match pitch. So should they match notes not only with correct rhythmic values, but those appearing at the proper staff line or space as it pertains to the cantus firmus at the top as they scroll. Players match these notes by pressing the space bar when they are standing on a platform to drop them onto the corresponding notes below. If the drop note/brick is correct, the note at the bottom will turn green and the player then receives a point. This makes it seem as if it is a really competitive 2-player game, especially since at the end of each level a winner is declared. However, both characters actually collaborate on dropping notes to match the notes below, which ultimately result in the playback of mensurated canon along with the original. So only notes which have already had a note dropped on them will sound. And so at the end, the players and audience are not presented with a tabulation of who won the most points, but rather presented with the entire melody, playing back only the notes that they managed to activate during the performance. As a side note, specifically in the concert this game was intended for, winning would have an impact on the concert because prior to playing the game, each player would draw the name of one of the pieces that was going to be performed out of a hat, and whichever player won the game, their piece would be performed next. As this game is based on a cantus firmus and has musical themes embedded into the gameplay, we wanted the visuals to in some way be derived from musical imagery. We needed to display the cantus firmus at the top for the sake of gameplay, and also the mensurated version of the cantus firmus needed to appear at the bottom so that the players had proper targets for the notes/bricks that they needed to drop, and also a visualization of which notes had already been activated. We ended up using parts of an original photograph of the cantus firmus, and we decided to keep an aesthetic unity and give all of the visuals the same early music type of look. This also worked well with the side-scroller mechanics and connotations, as side-scrollers already are associated with the idea of retro gaming. The platforms were created by designing textures using early music font set against backgrounds taken from snapshots of blank spots in the original cantus firmus. There are staff lines that go through the background so that players can see what note the platforms are on. The avatars are actually clef symbols, so everything in the game is unified on some level. Everything is an element from a score manuscript with an early music aesthetic. All of the sound in the game is derived from Omne Trinum Perfectum by Ludwig Senfl. Each level contains a different fragment of the overall melody, but we wanted to keep it relatively uniform in sound, so that during the concert it would return to something familiar even though each section was a bit different. This would also have an impact on the ending, so that when the melody was presented in full, the sound was the same as it was presented during the performance. All of the sounds were pre-recorded using the Hauptwerk virtual organ, albeit using slightly different registrations for different components of the game. Each level consisted of the following basic sounds: a looping cantus firmus, presented in its original state, the generated cantus firmus, with a slightly different registration, looping, but only with the activated notes playing. And just as a note, this is using a type of sequencer, so the activated notes will always play in the correct position, and so sometimes this can leave large gaps in the sound. The background sound, which is actually a slowed, processed version of the cantus firmus, and some incidental game sounds, such as notes that play with a random pitch when characters cause the individual notes/bricks to fall, as well as a sort of falling or dying sound, which is actually derived from the air sound of the Hauptwerk organ. The incidental sounds become those that the players have the most immediate control over, as they can make a block fall at any moment, and they can also choose to fall themselves at any time. However, because the pitches generated when a block falls are chosen between a random collection of pitches, they do not actually have complete control over these sounds. On a pitch and rhythmic level, they have much more control over the generated melody below. However, again, they do have to make the correct note/brick fall on the correct note below to activate that sound. So this makes the overall player control over the sound somewhat complicated and a little bit difficult. So is Occumbotactus a game or is it a performance? The gameplay is really reminiscent of a side-scrolling game, and there are points given for the players, as well as clear goals displayed to the performers and the audience. At the same time, all of the sounds in the game are designed so that the players can interact not just as a player, but within the sound environment itself. The game will advance regardless of the choices the players make. Players might choose to drop boxes not for the sake of receiving points, but simply to trigger the sounds. They may also intentionally die or fall to generate that sound. And they may choose to drop certain boxes or choose not to drop certain boxes so that certain parts of the canon melody either play or don't play. And this will impact also what is presented to the players at the end of the game. The players can also engage with this world visually on screen, so deciding to fight with each other or push each other off platforms or stay completely away from one another. Where is the line between a game and performance in the first place? Is live streaming of gameplay technically a performance? These questions are, of course, broad questions that go beyond the scope of the short gamified musical piece, but they're interesting to consider given the rise of gamified art music as well as the popularity of gameplay streaming. Obviously, there's a collective interest in watching others play video games. In the case of Occumbotactus, it is also important to consider that in order to actually properly play and engage with the game, one probably should have a rudimentary knowledge of reading music, especially when, for example, pitch matching is required, and not all audience members or players may necessarily have that. The game's rules are also presented very briefly, with not much information, so that the players have to somewhat figure this out as more levels of the game are played. This is intentional as it allows players to decide for themselves whether to become players or performers or perhaps a combination of the two, and to decide themselves how exactly they will engage in the audiovisual environment. Thank you. If you're interested in checking out Occumbotactus, I am posting the link below.